Yeah, I sat in the parking lot, wet hair, and called the owner and said, I think I want to do this.
This is Unlawful. Welcome to Unlawful. As always, I'm Brandon Renken. I'm super excited today because I have Kelly Carr on with me. Kelly Carr is a new friend, and Kelly Carr is described on LinkedIn as a fractional in-house counsel. First of all, is that true? Are you a fractional in-house counsel? And second of all, what is that?
We all get to dream, Brandon. I spent the last 11 years as an actual in-house counsel. And when I left that job earlier this year, I loved what I did. And what I had realized so many times working in there were other smaller companies who couldn't afford to have full-time in-house counsel, but really needed them. It would have made things a lot easier. And so I really wanted to serve some of those mid-sized companies, smaller companies that could really use part of a general counsel, but couldn't afford the whole thing. So that was the impetus behind En La Senda, which I set up.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question is, I've seen firm lawyers do that on occasion, especially on the transactional side. You started out as a litigator, which makes it even more impressive that you ever became an in-house counsel. But how did you do that?
I had one shot and I took it. When I was at Jones Day, is the firm that I started with, and back then, at least, the way that Jones Day was organized in the trial practice, you could get a case from any section of the civil world. I got everything from credit and finance to employment matters. And so it really positioned me well to have a toe in a bunch of different subject areas. And then when I was up for partner, they asked me to form a construction practice between the Dallas and Houston offices, which is a tough sell because construction companies are so heavily insured and they don't pay those kind of rates. But
For sure.
While I was doing it, I met the company that I went in-house with for 11 years, and they took a shot on me and I took a shot on them. So.
And then what's the transition like to go from a person who's thinking strategically about disputes all the time to go to the day-to-day decision-making of a business person?
It was a little daunting, I'm not going to lie. I picked up the phone to the partner who had hired me at Jones Day, and I think my exact question was, what have I done? I grew up, we were an immigrant family. My mom ran her own business successfully for 35 years. It's amazing some of the fundamentals that you can pick up regardless of the industry. I think probably the best thing I did to make the transition was shut my mouth for a while and listen a lot. And I would go flop in people's guest chairs and ask them if I'd used up my dumb questions for the month, and just made them get out markers on a whiteboard and explain everything to me. So
Sure.
I think that was probably the thing that made the transition okay. But it was a lot to learn.
You had this one shot and you took it. Obviously, there's that moment of cold water. When did the water warm up? Like, when did you start thinking, you know what, I'm all right?
When I called the partner that I had worked for at Jones Day, he said, give it 6 months and call me back and see how you feel. And when I called him back, I think he used better words than I could. He said, have you done the same thing twice yet? And I said, yes. And he said, now you're an expert.
That's a good mentor. I can remember when I started practicing law and I asked a 6th or 7th year associate, hey, when do you stop being worried about every single thing you do? And he looked at his watch and he was like, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. That's about it. I don't think I ever stopped. But the thing is, it's a moving target too. It's not like you leave the company that you walked into. The company I worked for, we grew from 278 million to 600 million over the time that I was there.
So that's the jump from the firm to being in-house counsel. And now you've made another jump where you're doing this fractional position. Once you make that second jump out of in-house counsel and now you're on your own, right? How does that happen?
I wish I had a magic recipe. When you prep your company for sale and you sell it, sometimes that means the buying company doesn't retain all of the people that they bought. But it was a little bit of an inorganic kind of thrust out there. I took some time off, but I started making lists in my phone. People who had picked up the phone to me and said, hey, can I ask you a question just off the record, right?
Sure.
Companies that I knew that were not a part of my non-compete. And the truth is, I started talking to a lot of the lawyers that I had met through a board position on the bar and that I had used as outside counsel. And so I started reaching out to them and saying, hey, who are your clients that maybe you're working with the CFO as your point of contact, or maybe you're working with the operational manager or somebody in accounting or whatever. And it would be super helpful if you had an in-house lawyer to work for, and maybe those clients you could introduce me to, because CFOs and operational executives, they don't have the bandwidth, right? And necessarily the legal background to make those strategic calls.
They don't have the bandwidth. So often what they do is they make the strategic call to hire the law firm that they think is least likely to get them fired. And usually that's brand based.
One thing we haven't touched on is just to occupy the other half of my brain. I went and bought a business in downtown Boulder that I knew nothing about. That's a whole other aspect of it. I think some of it takes not being afraid of change, right? It's being really open to change. And from the time we're young, we're taught change is bad and stability is good, and that those are opposites. They're not. We're taught that we want to just have this security, right? These words that we put in there that are inherently taught to us to mean not change. And then we sit over here on this side and say, oh, change is opportunity, but we don't really embrace that. We've picked up and moved countries. I've changed jobs. I mean, and the more you get used to it, I climb mountains all the time. It is nothing but change all the way up, and you're prepared for anything. And you go into it mentally that way. I mean, to the point of your entire podcast, right?
Kelly, what's your unlawful moment?
My unlawful moment was post the acquisition of our company. For the first time since I was literally about 12 years old, my mom had me working. I found myself not having a job to go to. And I had to ask myself what I was going to do. Did I want to choose to go back into the practice of law, or did I want to go do something else? And I chose both. And what I realized, no matter how much you love something, it can put a giant burden on you. I miss and love the company, but man, it was nice to have a break from it too. I've been so busy for so many years, 22 years of answer the phone at all hours. And I walked into a float spa. Some of you guys might have heard of this, the sensory isolation tanks. The military uses them to train in foreign languages. It's deep, deep relaxation, but basically you take away light and sound as much as you're comfortable with. And so a couple of my girlfriends gave me a gift certificate to a float spa here in Boulder. And I walked in and just kismet, maybe it was up for sale. And 2 hours later, I was the new owner of this float spa. And,
talk about jumping off a cliff, 2 hours.
Yeah, sat in the parking lot, wet hair, and called the owner and said, I think I want to do this. Because it was something it made so much sense to me. It was just absolutely the yin and yang of my life, right?
Sure.
All of this in your head, solving problems. And when you got in the float spa, it was about wellness and mental health. I share this a little more easily now, but underlying all of this, my son was really struggling with a mental health challenge. He had an unfortunate couple of incidents in his young life that had really driven him to a difficult spot in his life. And when I discovered what it was, took some massive steps to get him out of that situation and get him on this track. And I'll fast forward to say, what was standing out to me while all of this sale of the company, all of this is going on in the background, and then looking for this, is realizing this complete dearth of mental health services that we have in this country, particularly for kids, which is where we need to start, right? And the float spa being one of those places that is just good for everybody. We have clients with physical disabilities, mental health challenges, and just people like you and me who need to get out of our heads. And it has just been this wonderfully fulfilling thing. And the irony to bring everything back around is it gives me the freedom to still do the parts of law that I like. And then I get to do the business parts that I enjoyed as well, because I get
and you can float for free.
I just float for free. Yeah. My staff's really nice that way. That not only do they remind me if I'm getting grouchy that maybe it might be time to float, but they don't even charge me when I go in there.
Yeah, it's very nice. There are so many little opportunities in life to be doing nothing else.
I mean, it's just this absolute freedom from responsibility. I mean, you're breathing and your heart's beating and everything else is just kind of taking care of itself.
It's taking care of itself, right?
Yeah. And literally, all you have to do in there, you can turn off the lights, you can turn off the music, whatever you're comfortable with. All you have to do in there is breathe.
I really appreciate you taking time. It's been an absolute joy to meet you. And like I said, my favorite offshoot of this project is that I've met so many incredible people that I never would have met before, and I don't have to go to happy hour to do it. Like I said, I really appreciate your time, and that's unlawful.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Far too kind. Yeah. Ready? Let's go. Can I get an encore? Do you want more? Cook and roll with the Brooklyn boys. So for one last time, I need y'all to